Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good evening, students. Apologies, there was some technical problems, so we have delayed by some 10 minutes. My sincere apologies. You had to spare 10 minutes of your valuable time. We will start the session today on supply. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, we had discussed on introduction of GST, and we have seen what is taxation, what is GST per se, and what are the various constitutional provisions. So that was our basic startup on this topic of GST. Today we are starting the actual session on the GST topic itself, which is supply. Supply is a very important term because the whole GST lies on supply. Okay, like how excise duty was on the activity of manufacturing. Similarly, GST is on the activity of supply. If there is a supply, then there is GST. If there is no supply, then there is no GST. So we will understand what is the definition of supply, what are the various schedules around the definition of supply. Supply, one word itself covers the whole quantum of sale, service, rental, lease, all the terms, whatever transactions we do are all covered under the definition of supply. So supply itself, for that one term, we have this one chapter, and this one whole session is dedicated for supply. So you can understand the relevance and importance of the word supply, how much important it is. If there are any questions from the last thing, then we will do, but nothing, I would see any questions. Somebody is asking, please explain seamless flow of credit. Now, seamless flow of credit means, before we move, so this question has been coming since last session, so I'll just answer. What is seamless flow of credit? We have seen through an example that if I purchase something and I pay taxes on that, okay, and on the same product when I sell, I will collect the tax on that, right? So I will pay taxes to my vendor and I will collect taxes from my supplier on the same product. So this becomes double taxation, right? Somebody is charging me tax, then I'm charging tax again on this. On the same product, why should there be a double taxation? That's the reason. To avoid this double taxation, government is giving you a credit. This is called as input tax credit under GST. Input tax credit means whatever taxes I paid on my purchase, I don't have to pay that much taxes again to the government. This is called as seamless flow of credit. When I purchase something, I would have purchased at a lower price, I will sell it at a higher price. So when I sell it at a higher price, the GST, what government should get is only on the differential between my sale price and purchase price. So how do I get this? Is through the process of seamless flow of credit, which works that when I purchase, I pay GST. On this GST, whatever I have paid, I can avail this as a credit when I make a sale. So when I sell, I collect output tax, but I pay to the government net of my input tax credit. This is called as seamless flow of credit. More details, more intricacies we'll discuss in the input tax chapter. But understand this basic knowledge. If you understand this basic, then everything else is revolving around it. Great. I'm not able to join yesterday. Can I start from today or need to see yesterday's lecture first? You can start from today because basic introduction, each sessions are different. So previous chapters which you have left over, you can refer to them. You can see to that later on. Good evening, everyone again. How is it related with exporting and importing state? It is related to exporting. And how is the input tax related to exporting and importing state? Because when I do a interstate sale, I have paid CGST and SGST, but when I've sold, I collect IGST. So how can the credit of CGST and SGST be claimed against my IGST sales? Is the complete intricacies which we'll see in input tax credit chapter. So now let us get on to today's topic, which is supply. Okay. Now, what is supply? To understand this in a simpler manner, we will see what was the pre-GST tax structure. What was the pre-GST tax structure which was working out? Earlier, it was excise duty. Now, for any taxation to be levied, there has to be a levy. Okay. For any taxation, we have seen the constitutional provision that says that no tax shall be levied except with the authority of the law. So authority has been given. Now the law has got the authority. Okay, law ko authority mil gaya hai. Now there has to be a levy provision. Okay, the levy should be clear and crisp. It should be very clear. It should tell what are you going to tax. Now, if you take an example of an income tax should tell what is this tax, this law, the income tax law going to charge, on whom it is going to charge, what is the rate of tax, and all the intricacy details. So it should give these basic details. Only then it is called as a proper levy. It cannot be just like that. It cannot be just whimsically worded. It cannot be like artificially worded, or it cannot be uncertain. There should be certainty in the levy, right? So income tax says that when you earn any income under the 5 heads, then there'll be charge tax on the person who is earning it, and the rate of tax is specified, right? All these ingredients are present, then the charge is levied, right? So that's how the levy provision works under income tax. Similarly, under excise duty, under the earlier excise duty which was levied, it was under list 1 of 7th schedule. The taxable event in case of excise was manufacturing of goods. So once you manufacture goods, that was the event when you will pay the excise duty. If you buy any goods, okay, and if you don't manufacture, it's just there in your warehouse, there will not be any excise duty, because the taxable event is the activity of manufacture. So once I manufacture, then excise duty was levied. Similarly, under customs duty, the levy is when the taxable event is import and export of goods. So when I import something is when the levy triggers. Service tax, similarly, service tax was the taxable event was rendering of any service. So when I render any service is when I will be leviable to service tax. Then under sales tax, the levy was on the transfer of ownership of goods. So whenever I do any transfer of ownership of any goods, okay, then sales tax was levied. Similarly, there has to be a taxable event under which GST shall be levied, which is supply. So under GST, the levy triggers when there is a supply. If there is no supply, then there is no GST. Now, what is supply is clearly defined under Section 7. Section 7, I would suggest that you remember this section because it is a very important section. Just if you remember, if you by heart this section, lot of your questions can be answered. Section 7 is a lengthier section, but still it is very important for the exams and even post exams, so you can remember and by heart this section. What is supply? Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both, okay, such as sale. 8 terms have been given: sale, barter, exchange, sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal. So 8 terms have been given: sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal, made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. What, sir, you're reading the terms, what is there that everybody can read, but each and every word is important, okay? Even if I read this sentence 10 times, I wouldn't say that it's a mistake. It is still important because as and when I repeat, as and when you hear, you'll remember it, okay? So this is a very important definition. We will understand by splitting this and understanding each and every term. Important terms. Supply includes all forms of supply. So it means it starts that supply includes. The first thing is includes. What is the relevance of this word includes? Includes. It could have just said supply means. Why did they use the word includes? When they say supply includes, it means it's an inclusive definition. Inclusive definition means apart from general understanding of the word supply, supply includes the following. So when an inclusive definition is given, it means the general meaning continues. Apart from that, the definition includes the following terms. This is an inclusive definition. Okay. Another example, the opposite of inclusive definition is exhaustive definition. They can just tell that supply means, which means whatever is stated is only covered, but nothing else. If they would have said supply means all forms of supply of goods or services, it means only this. It is restrictive definition. But when it is an inclusive definition, it has wider amplitude, which means that general meaning of supply, whatever you say, that is also supply. But to give a clarification, I am including the following terms. So it includes the following terms. So supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services, or both. So it includes all forms of supply of goods or services. So mind you, it includes goods and services. So that's why GST is the Goods and Services Tax Act. The tax is levied on supply of goods and services, or it could be both. What could be an example of both, sir? It could be a case where it's a composite supply, wherein goods and services are both supplied together, like an AMC contract. I have an air conditioner. On that, when I buy an air conditioner, I say I will buy the air conditioner along with the fitting charges. So can I separate this? No, I cannot separate it. Both are inclusive. So it involves a transaction of buying the product and the installation. So it involves a component of goods as well as service. So both are embedded in it. That's why it could be an example of goods or services or both. I also mentioned about AMC. So when I buy a annual maintenance contract for this air conditioner, the person will come, will do the servicing of it, and if there's any defect in the product, he will also repair the products. He will replace the spare parts. So that is also an example of supply of goods or supply of both goods and services. So supply includes supply of goods or supply of services or supply of both. And such as, so to take away any ambiguity, they have further defined what all it could include. It could include 8 terms: sale, barter, sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal. So it includes all these 8 terms. Now, what are these 8 terms? Sale, we understand what is sale. Selling of goods. Transfer. Transfer generally means when I'm transferring from one place to another place. Example could be stock transfer. When I'm doing stock transfer from my head office to my branch office, that is also covered under supply. So if I do a branch transfer from my head office to my branch, why is it under supply? It is between two same entities, head office and branch, both are same, both are one entity. Then why supply? Why is it covered under supply? To avoid the complications what were there under the earlier taxes, they've said we will include transfer also under the definition of supply. So what will it cover? It will cover any stock transfer between the head office to the branch office, right? That is covered under supply. But what is specifically liable to tax will be transfer from head office to branch office if they have either separate registration or they are located in different states. Okay, mind you, what is covered under transfer is transfer between head office to branch office. That is not a sale, right? Because you are transferring to your another entity, which are both under one registered unit. Okay, under one entity, both are legally one unit, but for the purpose of convenience, you have a branch. So when I do any transfer of goods, I do a stock transfer from my head office to branch office, then it is liable to tax if they are either in the different states or within the same state but having two different registrations. Okay, only then it is covered under transfer. So sale is covered, transfer is covered. Barter. What is the example of a barter? I sell my television and I get a new refrigerator. So I'm giving my old television. I'm for the same value. I'm getting a refrigerator. So it's a example of a barter. Is GST leviable on this? Is it a supply? Yes. Even barter transaction, even though it is not the exchange of money, but there is an exchange of commodity for one commodity for another. Ek diya, ek liya. So barter is also leviable and it is also covered under supply. So even if barter transaction does not involve monetary terms but involves a value term, because I'm giving something and getting something, the barter transactions are also covered under supply. Then exchange, right? You have an exchange offers going on sometime wherein you give your old phone, okay? You will get a new phone plus you need to pay something because the value of the old phone does not match with the value of the new phone. So old phone, get a new phone and pay something else also. Pay something, some monetary consideration is an example of exchange. License, it could be license for anything, licensing out software, licensing of a premises, giving a license to use, royalty, all of those things are covered under license. Rental, it could be a rental of space, rental of a premises, rental of machinery, all of those are covered under rental services. Leasing transactions, we know what is a leasing transaction. You can have a operating lease and a financial lease. All leasing transactions are also covered under supply. And disposal, very important. Generally disposal, you dispose of something, why there should be a supply on it? Because when you dispose it off, you have taken the input tax credit when you bought it. So if I bought any asset, okay, and I've taken the input tax credit, when I dispose it off, the government is saying that we have given you the credit on the purchase of your machinery with the assumption that you will use it. Now, if the use is completed and you're disposing it off, that disposal is also a supply activity. That is also a supply transaction. Now, on that also, even the advance receipt also is liable because it is a transaction of made or agreed to made for a consideration, right? It could be made today, you raise an invoice, that itself is liable to GST, or it could be that you receive advance and you agree to supply in the future. That is also covered under the definition of supply. So 8 terms made or agreed to be made for a consideration. So all of these transactions, 8 transactions, all of the supply transactions is a supply if there is a consideration. If consideration means you're selling it or you're supplying it, you're providing service on a condition of receipt of some monetary consideration. Now, it could be a monetary consideration or a non-monetary consideration, but there is some consideration because in a barter, there is no monetary consideration. There is something else you receive. So it's a non-monetary consideration. So supply includes anything which you're supplying for a consideration, either monetary or non-monetary, but there should be a consideration. Like if you're doing anything free supply, you are doing any activity for which you're not receiving consideration, then it is not a supply. Now, supply includes all of these terms and it should be for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of his business. He should be doing this in the course or furtherance of his business. If he's doing this not for business, if he's doing this for his personal will and there is no consideration involved, okay, both these considerations is required because it says made or agreed to be made for a consideration by the person in the course of furtherance of business. So it should be, there should be a consideration and it should be in the course of furtherance of business. Even if one limb is not there, then it will not be a supply. Okay. So supply includes all of these terms. This is the first part. Wherein supply, vanilla meaning of supply would mean all forms of supply of goods or services, just sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal, made or agreed to be paid for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. So it should be with consideration and for in the course or furtherance of business. So if I am selling, if I'm selling, say I'm a dealer of mobile phones, I buy mobile phones and if I sell mobile phones, this is an example of sale transaction, liable, considered as a supply. If I buy some mobile phones and I give away something to a charity and I don't receive any consideration, then there is no supply in it. So it is not a supply because it is in my course of business of selling mobiles, but I have not received any consideration. Take another example of a transaction which is not in the course of furtherance of business. I am a chartered accountant. I am providing statutory audit services and things like that. So it is liable to, it is covered under supply. Now, if I do any paintings activities, once in a while I do some painting, right? And I receive some consideration, but it is not in the course of my business. One-time activity I've done, it's not my routine activity. So it is not in the course or furtherance of my business. So it is not liable to, not liable under supply. Okay, so this is the definition of supply at the first instance. What is the difference between, so is the video clear? I've received something. Okay, now they're saying video is fine now. What is the difference between barter and exchange? It is explained. Barter means you do something wherein you get something in return, but exchange also means similar thing you exchange something, but apart from that, there is some additional consideration which you have to give in not purely exchange of goods, only exchange of goods plus money also. Okay. Does transfer include a consideration? Transfer may include a consideration or may not include a consideration. Generally, it includes a consideration because if you're transferring from your head office to a branch office, the branch will show in their accounts as payable to the head office, right? So it generally involves a consideration because you might transfer it at a different price. That is fine because they have not specified that it should be at arm's length or as such in the definition of supply. When you come to valuation, then they say, okay, the value could be a different value and things like that. But transfer plus consideration, transfer with consideration, and in the course of further of business. So all of these 8 terms should be with consideration. So transfer also should be with consideration. Generally, when the head office transfers to branch office, they put some value, they just consider some value on it. So transfer should be with consideration. What do you mean by course or furtherance of business? We'll come to the definition of business. That time I will explain you what is the meaning of course or furtherance of business. Barter and exchange difference I have mentioned. Subscription of Netflix and magazine come in which head? The next head we will discuss on Netflix and magazine thing. Can you explain meaning of disposal again? Disposal means I have I purchased some goods and I'm selling those goods. That is an example of sale. I purchased some goods and I'm not able to sell it because it is outdated. I take an example of this pandemic period. A lot of people brought some oximeters. When they brought these oximeters, they expected that there will be a lot of value for it. Then the value came down and they're not able to sell this because they're selling at loss. So they will ultimately dispose it off and sell it at lower prices. That is one example of disposal. Another example is I've bought some machinery. I've used it for 5 years. Now I don't need it. So I will sell it off. Disposal would mean that I'm disposing it off for the other person. Either the other person can buy it as a scrap or he could do something out of it, but it is not sold with the intention what it is bought. So that's an example of disposal. So when I'm disposing of something, it is called as a disposal. What is arm's length transactions? In income tax, you will understand what is an arm's length transaction, wherein you sell anything for a actual consideration. That is called as an arm's length transaction. So if I sell something in the open market for rupees 500, and if I sell to everyone at 500 and some people I give discount, that is still permitted because that's the price which I give to an unrelated person. But if I give to a related person, like I transfer something to my branch office, then I might not charge the same price, right? Because I might have an influential price saying that he is my branch, I can sell it at 300 rupees also. So that is not an arm's length transaction. It is an influential price transaction. That is not treated as an arm's length transaction. Okay. Now, first definition, we have understood supply includes this, but it includes more. It doesn't stop here. It says that it includes all of these forms of supply. It also includes import of services. Import of services for a consideration. Okay. Why it is given separately here is because in the first part, we saw that there should be consideration and it should be in the course of furtherance of business. But the second part is import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course of business. Whether I use it for the business or no, it will be treated as a supply transaction. Import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course of business. Very good that one person has asked a question on Netflix. So when I take a subscription of Netflix company is outside India. It is providing some services to me. So it is an import of services. I pay money for that. So there is a consideration involved. I am using it for my personal purposes, not in the course of furtherance of business. That is also covered under definition of supply. So only for import of services, you'll see that the exception is there that I import something for a consideration. Now, if I import something for free, like example, Spotify music app, the companies outside India, they give me some subscription. And for that subscription, initially for 1 year, they don't take any charges. So it is not for a consideration and it is not in the course of furtherance of business. So it is out of supply because there is no consideration involved. But Netflix, example, import of services, it is for a consideration and it is not in the course of furtherance of business, still it is supply, right? Sir, in Netflix case, I download the movie and see it, but I pay the consideration. Now Netflix is outside India. How will they come to India and pay the taxes, or how will the Indian government go to Netflix and collect the taxes? They will not go. That's why they have made a provision, said that any person who's providing such kind of services, okay, it is called as online information database access and retrieval services. Such services, if somebody is importing in India, then the person who's providing that services is supposed to appoint somebody in India, and this person in India has to pay. Okay, so if I am doing anything along with Netflix, then Netflix is responsible to appoint somebody in India for paying taxes on this. Okay, then third thing is the activity specified in Schedule 1, which is made or agreed to be made without a consideration. The first point, two things are involved. It should be for a consideration and it should be in the course of furtherance of business. Second limb, we saw that import of services, wherein even if it is not in the course of furtherance of business, it's fine, but there should be a consideration. Now, third probability is when I do some transactions, then there is no consideration, but it is made in the course of furtherance of business. Okay. Now, third limb is Schedule 1. Schedule 1 will specify what are all those activities which is made in the course of furtherance of business. But if it is not, if there is no consideration involved, then also it is a supply. Okay. So the supply definition is exhaustive. They have tried to cover all the limbs. They have said first, plain thing is the 8 activities are there. For these 8 activities to be treated as supply, you should have 2 conditions. One should be in the for consideration and it should be in the course of furtherance of business. Second limb, import of services, which is made without a consideration, but it is made for a consideration, but it could be for business or non-business. Third limb is activities covered in Schedule 1, which is made or agreed to be made without consideration, but for purpose of business. Then 1A. 1A, you can understand that earlier 1A means there's an amendment. In the earlier initial definition, it was not there. Then the government saw something and they have amended this. When it says supply includes certain activities or transactions, where certain activities or transactions constitute a supply in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1, they shall be treated either as supply of goods or supply of services as referred in Schedule 2. So what they're trying to say is, we will give you one schedule called Schedule 2. In this Schedule 2, we will mention certain activities. Now, these activities we will classify them either as supply of goods or supply of services. Why, sir? Because the rate of GST for supply of goods is different and rate of GST for supply of services is different. Classification is very much important. So this to avoid litigation in some cases where the transactions are prone to litigation, they have said that in Schedule 2 we'll specify some activities wherein we will classify them as supply of goods or supply of services. Okay, so that is Schedule 2. Then 7.1 has 3 parts. 7.1a is a classification. Then 7.2 says that notwithstanding anything what is contained in subsection 1, that means whatever we have said in subsection 1, apart from that, activities or transactions which is specified in Schedule 3. Okay, Schedule 1 we saw, Schedule 2 we saw, now we are seeing Schedule 3. Schedule C3 has those activities or transactions which is specified there, and some activities which will be undertaken by the central government or state government in which they are engaged as public authority, which activities will be specified. So some activities will be specified, and Schedule 3 activities are there, which shall be treated neither as a supply of goods nor supply of services. Okay, so Schedule 3 activities and some activities which will be notified, these activities will be treated not as a supply of goods nor as a supply of services. Why? So there are some transactions which plainly if we see that it is liable to supply, right? But the government wants to give some exclusion to them, some relaxation to them, or they want to keep it outside GST. Okay, that's the reason they have specified a Schedule 3. So Schedule 3 includes those activities which will be treated neither as supply of goods, it is not a supply of goods, nor a supply of services. Right? Then subsection 3 says, subject to the provision of subsection 1, 1A and 2, the government may on the recommendation of the council specify by notification the transactions that are treated as supply of goods and not supply of services, supply of services not supply, which means that the government has power to come up with some activities for which there could be a confusion whether it's the goods or services. So they can specify saying that, okay, for this activity, we will notify saying that this is supply of goods and not supply of services, or they could come up with some activities which is supply of services and not supply of goods. So this power is given to the government to come up with some clarification. Okay, so 7 we have seen 1, 1A and 3. So we will understand this with the example of a diagram. What is definition of supply? Supply definition, supply means 7 says supply means supply of goods or services. It should be for consideration and it should be in the course of furtherance of business. So any supply, these 3 things are necessarily requirement. Now what are the exceptions to this? Exception to in the course of furtherance of business is 7.1b, wherein these 2 conditions should be there, which means these 2 conditions should be there. It should be of goods or services. It will be for consideration. But even if it is not in the course of furtherance of business, it is liable to as supply. That example is 7.1b, which is import of services, right? And another exception is it is supply of goods or services, but it is in the course of furtherance of business, but it is not for consideration. That is 7.1c. It is a Schedule 1 transactions, which is for a consideration. It is not for a consideration, but it is in the course of furtherance of business. Then we have seen Schedule 1 is here. Schedule 2 we know is classification. Then we have seen Schedule 3, which means transactions which are outside the scope of supply itself is Schedule 3. Okay, so 7.2 covers Schedule 3. Yeah, now let me take some questions here. Sir, in Spotify, Hotstar, etc., we can use it without subscription as well. Then it is not a supply. But when we take subscription, where additional services are there, it is supply. Correct. Your example is correct. So if it is without consideration, then it is not supply. Where it is with consideration, then it is a supply. Where is this schedule given in ICAI module? It is given in your ICAI module. Very much in your ICAI module, they are given Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3. Do we need to learn all this? Yes, we need to learn all of this. Vedanta, you need to know where is the schedule given in ICAI module. I'll tell you where it is given. They have given in page 2.22, wherein they specified what is Schedule 1, what all activities are covered. So Schedule 1 covers all of those things. I will also share it over here, but specifically in your study module, 2.22, if you see activities without consideration deemed supply, they have specifically mentioned there. If a question is asked what is supply, then we have to write 7.1, 7.1a, or we need to write 7.2 and 7.3 also. So they wouldn't expect you to rewrite the supply definition per se like that. So if you could just mention 7.1, 7.1a, okay, these 3 things if you write, that should be sufficient. That is 7.1 and 7.1a, that should be sufficient. Whether Schedule 3 supply are exempt supply or no. So it is not exempt. Schedule 3 says that it is not supply of goods nor supply of services. So you cannot treat it as an exempt supply. What is exempt supply is transactions which are exempted through a notification. So if there is any services which is exempted, like you take an example of rental for residential purposes. So rental, we have seen that it is liable to supply, but the government has given an exemption on rental for residential purposes. So that is an example of exempt services. But Schedule 3 activities is not exempt services. It is outside the purview of GST also. It is not a no supply transaction. You can call it as a no supply transaction. Schedule 3 and exempt supply are different. Explain 7.3 in short. 7.3 says, subject to the provisions of subsection 7.1a, 1.1a and 2, the government may on the recommendation of the council specify by notification the transactions that are to be treated. So the government has power to treat some transactions either as supply of services only and not supply of goods, or it can tell that these activities are supply of goods and not supply of services. So they have power to specify what is what. So if there's any ambiguity or any confusion, then they have power to specify what this transaction is supply. It will be treated as supply of services and not supply of goods. So that is the power what they have under 7.3. Okay, now let's move forward. That is supply of goods or services. We'll get into understanding of these schedules. Before that, let us understand what is the meaning of goods and services. Now, in your study module, you will see the definitions. Important definitions are given before the starting of the chapters. So you will have to read through them, but I will not read through all of those definitions. What are the important definitions is what I will read through. The first, what is the meaning of goods and what is the meaning of services? Goods means every kind of movable property. Simple. Goods means every kind of movable property. So any property which is immovable, right? We would have seen under a contract law, we have studied in our BCom or in your basic levels itself under Contract Act, you would have read what is an immovable property. Immovable property under Transfer of Property Acts means which is movable property means which is not an immovable property. And immovable property means, does it mean what is other than immovable property? No, they have not made it so very circular thing. They've said movable property means anything which is an immovable property. In the Transfer of Property Act, they've defined what is an immovable property. Okay, so anything which is fastened to earth, like a building, a tree, okay, anything fastened to earth is a immovable property. So apart from that, whatever is movable, basically you make things movable, like anything, any goods. You would say that, for example, a soap, a toothpaste, a jar, a phone, anything which is movable is an example of movable property. Now, the complication comes when a movable property is fixed, like a fan. And I buy a fan and I fix it. Now that becomes an immovable. So will you treat fan as a movable property or immovable property? It is still treated as a movable property. You're fixing it for the purpose of use, not to make it as an immovable property. You're fixing a fan to make it give you the, so that it is at one place and you get the air out of it, right? So it is a movable property because it can be detached and used. Similarly, large machineries, large oil tankers are taken up, and like a lift also is taken and affixed at one place because of the nature of its use and the basic nature of that activity itself. Whereas a lift has to be at one place, right? It cannot be moving from one place to another place. That's why it is fastened to one place for its mobility, for its usage. But by nature, it is a movable property itself, right? What is an immovable property? A land or anything like a building which you construct. After construction of the building, it is an immovable property. But before it was movable, all the bricks, stones, cement were all movable. So up till the stage when they are installed, it becomes a movable property. So these are all examples of movable property. So goods means every kind of movable property, but it excludes money and securities. So money and securities are excluded, but it includes actionable claim. It includes actionable claim means if I have a right for any claim, that is covered under the definition of goods. Okay, it is covered under the definition of goods. Actionable claim is included under the definition of goods. And it also includes growing crops, grass and things attached to or forming part of the land, which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. Which means I've agreed that I will sell you this land, and whatever is the crops growing on it, that is also sold to you. So I have agreed under a contract that all of these crops also are yours. So it is agreed to be severed before supply under a contract of supply. And even though it is immovable because these plants are still growing, but still it is a supply transaction because the growing crops, okay, have been agreed to be sold to you. Okay, so growing crops, grass, and things attached to farming part of the land, just because to avoiding out of the land, something has grown in it. Can I sell the contract? Anything which has come naturally after my contract with you, okay, that is not covered under definition of goods. What is covered under definition of goods is any growing crop, grass attached to farming part of the land, which is agreed to be severed, which is agreed to be removed, agreed to be chopped off before supply or under a contract of supply. Only that is covered under the definition of goods. So if I have any mining rights and things like that, wherein I've agreed that you will take off something of it, then it is covered under the definition of goods, right? Then what is services? Services means anything other than goods. Like how I had given you an example of immovable property means anything other than movable property. Similarly, services means anything other than goods. The services also excludes money and securities. So money and securities are excluded from the definition of goods and services. So money and securities is never treated as supply because it is excluded from the definition of goods and services both. But services includes activities relating to use of money, wherein I give exchange money, wherein I exchange currencies. I give rupees and get dollars. So it's a activity relating to use of money. So anything relating to use of money will be treated as a service. So any exchange transaction, any exchange charges what I collect, that will be liable for GST. But the value per se, and I give 100 rupees and I get dollars equivalent to 100, that transaction is not a service, but the vendor who is giving me the dollars, the charges what he collects for this will be liable for. So I will be liable for GST because it is covered under the definition of service. Activities relating to use of money or conversion of money by cash or any other mode, one form currency denomination to another, for which a separate consideration is charged. So this commission charges is what is covered under the definition of service. So goods and service, that is the definition. Sir, on page 2.8, there is written Section 7 of the CGST Act. Yes. So you should remember that there are three acts, CGST Act, SGST Act, and IGST Act. What is there under CGST Act? Replica is there under SGST Act also, because as we had discussed in the first chapter, CGST Act is an act for the central government and SGST Act is an act for the each of the states. Okay, each states will have the act. And the tax is to be collected, so they will both collect the same taxes because they will have both same powers. So whatever is there in CGST Act, replica is applicable under SGST Act also. Now IGST Act is the act which is liable for all your interstate transactions. But IGST Act has a section 20 wherein it says that to avoid any repetitions, whatever major provisions are there under the CGST Act will apply for IGST Act also. So CGST Act applies to IGST Act also, and whatever is there under CGST Act, similar sections are similar. All the sections are there under the SGST Act also. Okay. So when I say Section 7 of CGST Act, it means it also means that Section 7 of the SGST Act, and the Section 7 applies to IGST Act also, because IGST Act says that all the provisions of CGST Act will apply to IGST Act also. In case of services, what is use of money? In case of services, use of money means when I use money, like two examples I would give you. One example which I've given you, exchange transactions. Another use of money transaction is when I use money to give something as a loan and I collect interest. That interest is okay, used because of use of money. So that interest is liable as service. Okay. In this chapter, we will cover 1, 2, and 3. Yes, we are still not gone into the chapter, into the schedules. We'll go to the schedule 1, 2, and 3. So can you please explain again when money considered as supply and when not considered as supply? Money per se, giving loan is not a supply, but use of money for taking interest, use of money for getting exchange currency, taking another currency, all of those are covered under use of money and liable as service. Actionable claim, I will give you the meaning of actionable claim. We will get into the definition of actionable claim a little later. Just understand the definition of actionable claim means actionable claim means a claim or to any debt. Okay, it basically means a claim to any debt. So if I have to receive some money from somebody, okay, I have an actionable claim to it. So my debtors owe me something, but on what basis I can go to them? Based on whatever I've supplied to them and whatever invoice I've raised. So that is an actionable claim for which I can go and collect it. So that is an example of an actionable claim. Another example of actionable claim is a lottery ticket. Now, the lottery company has issued so many lotteries. If my number doesn't click to it, if I've not got the lottery hit, then it is not actionable. It's just a piece of paper. But when my number has got a hit, my number is selected, then that lottery ticket, what I have, I can go and claim the money, right? So that is an actionable claim. So I have a right to claim. I can take action against that person if he does not give me. So that is an example of actionable claim. So on securities has no GST. Yes, on securities, no GST is there. But on the securities, if any commission is charged, so if I buy any shares, securities cover shares, bonds, mutual funds, everything, right? So on the security of buying of a share, if the broker charges me brokerage charges, on that GST is there. But on buying of the security per se, there is no GST. Actionable claim, I've explained. Okay. Now we'll move to the next topic on what are the 8 terms, what are defined, and I've explained you briefly. Here we will recap on what are those 8 terms. Sale and transfer, where it means transfer of ownership of the title to the property from one person to another for a price. Transfer of ownership. The definition was not given under the GST Act. I have taken up the meaning and I've given it to you here. Transfer of ownership of the title of the property from one person to another person. So any sale transaction is covered under that. It is a contract where the seller transfers or agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a price, which is given under the definition of Sale of Goods Act. What is the meaning of sale is given under the Sale of Goods Act. Like sale of laptops by a dealer to a consumer is an example of sale transaction. Transfer, to convey or remove from one place to another, wherein there is no mention of consideration. Okay, under the definition of transfer, but the whole definition of supply says it should be for a consideration. So to general meaning of transfer is to convey or remove from one place to another. Example is transfer from warehouse to showroom, from one branch to another branch. Those are all examples of transfer. Barter is a exchange. Barter is to exchange goods or services for other goods or services. Like it could be, I gave you an example of barter of goods for other goods. It could be an example of barter of services for services also. When a CA consultancy services provided to a doctor for his exchange for any of his medical treatment. Okay, that is an example of barter of services. So barter need not be for goods. Barter could be for services also. Exchange is an act of giving or taking one thing for another, wherein new vehicle is sold plus some consideration is involved. It is an example of exchange. What is a license? A permission granted by competent authority to engage in a business or occupation or in an activity which is otherwise unlawful. Okay, so had there not be a thing, had it not been a license, whatever activity is done by another person becomes unlawful, right? Example would be permission to enter and use the property. So I'm given my property for the other person to use it. It is unlawful if he doesn't take my permission. So if I grant him that permission, that is an example of a license. Okay. So generally license is related to some kind of a property. When I've given the right for the other person to use that property, this is an example of license transaction. Disposal means sale, pledge, or giving away, use or consumption or disposition of a thing. Disposal is sale or transfer, but property does not possess merchantable warranty. Means if I sell something and if I give a defective product, I am liable, right? But if I do disposal, even if it is defect, I am not liable because I've disposed it off. I've not taken a merchantable warranty that it is not a defect product because I've disposed it without any conditions. If it works, it's good for you. If it doesn't work, I am not responsible. So that's the instance of, that's how sale and disposal are distinguished. Rental, arrangement to rent something off. Something means it could be a immobile property also, it could be a property also. Lease, to make a legal agreement by which money is paid in order to use land or building. So license and rental and lease. Rental is generally generally for a mobile property, and lease is a term which is used for a immobile property. So if I'm leasing out some land, building, or a property, then it is an example of a lease transaction. Lease is where possession is transferred along with the right to use property. License is similar to lease, except that the possession is not transferred. In a license, possession is not transferred. So all of these terms are interlinked. What is the small difference is what is being mentioned here. As per classification schedule 2, license, lease, or rental of goods with or without transfer of the right to use are covered under supply of services. So all of these three terms you will find under schedule 3, schedule 2, wherein they have classified these activities as supply of service. Okay, now let's take some examples so we understand thoroughly what is definition of supply. Mr. A buys a table for rupees 10,000 for his personal use and sells it off after 10 months of use to a dealer. This is not considered as a supply under GST, as this is not done by Mr. A for the furtherance of business. He's bought it for his personal use and he sells it off. He did not have an intention to sell it. He intended to use it, but for some reason he has sold it, and he is not into the business of buying and selling of the tables. So it will be treated as not a supply transaction. Mrs. B provides free coaching to neighboring students as a hobby. Is it a supply? It is generally understood as supply, but she's doing free coaching. So this is not considered as supply, as this act is not performed for a consideration. Since it is not for a consideration, this is not a supply. Third example, when a new mobile worth 10,000 is purchased in exchange of an old mobile along with the monetary consideration of 2,000. Then the new mobile's price is 12,000 rupees. My old mobile fetched 10,000. I'm paying 2,000. This is an example of exchange. Third, next thing is when a laptop is supplied for 20,000 along with the barter of printer, which is manufactured by the recipient, is an example of barter. Now, example of import, wherein Katrina Kaif uses services of a makeup artist from USA. Okay. Now, import of services, wherein there is a consideration involved, it is for the course of furtherance of business, because Katrina Kaif is into the business of celebrity. She is a model and she's an actress. It is for the consideration. It is in the course of furtherance of business. Even if it is not in the course of furtherance of business, it will be liable to GST. But in this case, she is registered under GST. So in that case, she will have to pay reverse charge mechanism. What is reverse charge mechanism? Wherein when somebody sells goods to you, the seller collects tax from you, right? That is called as normal GST. It is called as forward charge. But when somebody sells to you and he doesn't collect charges, you pay taxes. That is the example of reverse charge. So the foreign US artist, USA, the makeup artist supplying services to an Indian person who is registered. He is registered, then he has to pay GST under reverse charge basis. In case of a Netflix, in my case, I have not given my GST number. That case, Netflix has to pay. But if Netflix supplies to any business entity who is registered, then the registered entity has to pay GST on that under reverse charge mechanism. So reverse charge mechanism, this is one example. Apart from that, there are other examples. But as of now, understand that reverse charge mechanism is applicable on import of services. On import of goods also, should I pay reverse charge? No, because when I import goods, it will come through customs, and when I will pay customs duty and I will be paying IGST, so I don't have to pay reverse charge on supply of goods. On import of goods, I have to pay reverse charge only on import of services. Yeah, let me take some questions here before we move ahead. Please explain again crop as mobile property. Crop as a mobile property is treated as a mobile property when I buy a land, okay, and I just have a transaction of land, simple transaction. There might be some crop growing on it or not. I'm not paying it for the crop, but I'm paying for the property itself. So then on that crop, there is no GST. But when I'm paying all the crop, saying that it is agreed that I will pay for the crop also, which will be agreed to be severed later on, then I'm paying for the crop also. On that, GST will be leviable. Gift voucher can be called as an actionable claim. There's a little confusion here in terms of gift. There is not a settled case, but gift voucher is basically a monetary consideration which has been, it's like a discount. So you cannot call gift voucher as an actionable claim actually, because gift voucher enables you to buy something for which the money consideration either is paid by somebody else or the company is given it as a voucher. So it's like it can be treated as the nature of a discount, Charu. So it cannot be treated as an actionable claim. What if a person involved in providing loan business is part of goods or services? Aditi, I did not understand your question. Can you please clarify that? Can we claim actionable claim if our number is excluded from lottery pickup? No, if it is not there, then it is only that you have missed the chance. It is not an actionable claim. Difference between 7.1a and 7.173. 7.3 is classification of goods and services through a notification, but 7.1a is classification which is given under Schedule 2. So Schedule 2 is there in the Act itself, but 7.3 is given by a way of a notification. So there is difference. What is there in the Act can be changed only through the Parliament, but what is there in the 7.3 can be given through a notification by the Central Board of Indirect Taxes. So 7.173 is a delegated part wherein the notification can be issued. They've got that power, but Schedule 2 is there in the Act itself. So if I'm giving my property to someone to use without any rent, then will it be a license and consider a supply? If you are giving the property without any rent, then but what are you getting as a consideration? If you're taking some consideration, then it will be treated as a license activity. What is RCM? We'll discuss on RCM. Reverse charge basically is tax which is reversed. When a supplier doesn't collect tax, when a supplier is not entitled to collect tax, there are some activities will come through wherein the taxes on some activities or some services is to be paid by the recipient and not by the supplier. Now that is the activities which are treated as reverse charge. So understand, on import of services, reverse charge is applicable. No GST on export? Yes, no GST on export. Is there no customs duty on import of goods? There is customs duty on import of goods, but there's no customs duty on import of services, because customs duty is only on goods. Customs duty is not levied on services. So customs duty is not levied on import of services. What if Katrina Kaif example is not registered under GST? If Katrina Kaif is not registered under GST, then the makeup artist is providing services. He will not be liable to GST because he is the OIDR example, like Netflix example, what I gave is only specified on specified transaction which has OIDAR services, online information database access and retrieval services. Only on those services, the other person is liable to register in India and appoint somebody in India and pay taxes. But if he's a small vendor, if he's not a OIDAR service provider, then he is not liable to pay any GST. Okay, so a makeup artist providing services to Katrina Kaif, he will also not pay GST. Katrina Kaif, if she's not registered under GST, she will also not pay. So in case of import without or with consideration, it is supply, yes. But in general, without consideration, it is not supplied except to, yes. So except schedule, but in general, without consideration, it is not a supply, yes. In general, if it is without consideration, then it is not a supply except schedule 2, except schedule 1, not schedule 2. Schedule 2 is only a classification schedule. In case of reverse charge, if there is no registration, then how tax is collected? In case of reverse charge, if you're liable to reverse charge, then even if you're not registered, you are bound to registered, then the minimum limits of 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs and 40 lakhs, what we discussed, will not apply. If you are doing any services on which you are liable to pay under reverse charge, then you have to register and pay. RCM is applicable only when recipient is registered? No. If you see the RCM schedule, and we'll discuss further, they have mentioned some specified services where they've said if you're doing any business, if you're a business entity, then also you will have to register and pay. If you're a RCM, if you're coming under those categories, we will come to those schedule under reverse charge. The next chapter itself is there on levy, charge and levy. We will come to that, saying that if you're doing any services, if you're receiving any services as a business entity, then even if you're not registered, you have to register and pay. When tax are paid by recipient in case of import of services is known as RCM. Yeah, it's only one of the examples. What if a business avails import of services without consideration? If a business avails import of services without consideration, and if it is from a related party, then it will have to pay. If it is from an unrelated party, and if it is without a consideration, then no GST will be applicable. Okay, if a business is availing any services without consideration, then no GST. But if because we have seen under import of services, one condition which is required is it should be for consideration. If it is for without consideration, then there's no GST. Exception is only if it is from a related party. Importing goods without consideration are considered as supply from relative. Importing of goods are covered under customs. Customs says whether you pay for consideration or no, you will have to pay the customs duty and GST. So import of goods is covered under customs. Customs law, when we read, we'll see that import of goods without consideration also is liable to customs duty, because there they have something called the valuation rules. Because once you clear goods, they cannot catch you. So immediately when you clear the goods itself, they will assess the value. If they feel the value what you have given is not correct, they'll go for valuation rules and they will decide the price for it and collect the customs duty on it. So in giving help for charitable organization is considered as services. Giving help for charitable organization, it is not considered as services because it is like a donation. So donation, there is no consideration. When you see the definition, you'll see that consideration means you should get something in return. If you're not getting something in return, it is not a service activity. Who is eligible to register under GST? We'll see under the registration chapter, Madhuri. Can we claim ITC under RCM? Yes, Ranjini, we can claim. Others don't ignore this question because you have to understand ITC, you have to understand RCM. But Ranjini, your answer, yes, you can claim. Okay. So we have seen the examples of supply. Consideration. The questions, students, are really interesting. Exactly when you ask some question, the answer for that is ready in the next slide. Consideration means, what is consideration generally? Consideration means payment. Now this payment does not mean it should be made in money only. Any non-money payment or payment in kind is also a consideration. And we have seen that supply has to have two important things, that there should be a consideration and it should be in the course of furtherance of business. Consideration means payment. Now this payment can be either in money or non-monetary terms. Either of it is sufficient. Okay. Consideration can be also in non-monetary terms, either in money or kind, that is monetary value for an act or forbearance. Consideration need not always flow from the recipient. So if I'm supplying something to one party and if the other party doesn't pay me, is it no consideration if somebody else pays on his behalf? So it can be paid either by the recipient or any person on behalf of the recipient. It can be made by the third party also. That is also a consideration. However, in the definition of consideration, they have excluded one thing, which is subsidy given by central government or state government. So subsidy given by central government or state government is not considered as a supply. It could be a capital subsidy or any subsidy. They've just specified that subsidy given by central government or state government is not considered as a supply. Is not considered as a consideration. Now, subsidy given by Melinda Gates Foundation. Melinda Gates Foundation is a private foundation. It is not a owned by central government or a state government. So any subsidy which you have received by Melinda Gates Foundation is also a consideration itself. A deposit. Now, what's a deposit? A deposit means anything which you've given to the other person to keep it for a certain period. So it's an example of deposit. A deposit given in respect of supply of goods or services shall not be considered as a payment unless the supplier applies such deposit as consideration for the said supply. Now, if I've given something to hold it as a deposit, now deposit means I give something in advance. Now he will return to me after some number of years, right? So it is not an advance for goods. So advance and deposit has to be distinguished. Advance means I've given you an advance. Against this advance, you will supply something to me. I'll give you an advance for which you will give me something as a service. So that's an example of advance wherein you will net off with some transaction which will take place. But a deposit is a fixed money which I give to the other person. It could be bearing interest or it could not be bearing interest. Anything which I've given as a deposit which will be returned after a particular number of years or upon fulfillment of certain conditions, that's an example of deposit. A deposit is not a consideration. So if I give a deposit, no GST would be charged on it because it's a deposit. Transaction in money is excluded from the definition of goods and services. So it's a transaction in money. On deposit, there will be no GST, but they've clarified that a deposit given in respect of goods or services shall not be considered as payment unless the supplier applies it such deposit as consideration for such supply. So I've given him as a deposit and I have the supplier treats it as a consideration. Then as a consideration, then it will be treated as a consideration, not otherwise. Like I've given a deposit, I've defaulted in making payment for his supplies what is made and has utilized the deposit for the sale transaction which has happened. Then only in such case that deposit will be treated as a consideration, not otherwise. Where there's some default I've made or for whatever reasons the supplier has used the deposit as a consideration for the goods, only then it will be treated as a consideration. Consideration has to be quid pro quo. Very important. Consideration has to be for quid pro quo. Quid pro quo means it should be something in return or you should get something in return for something. Meaning I supply something and I get money. If the other person is just giving me money and I'm not doing anything, so then it's a simple donation, right? When we give donation, we don't expect something in return. So that is an example of a non-quid pro quo, wherein there is nothing which I get in return. Okay, so that is the whole gamut of consideration. Consideration, what are the clarifications given? Donations, generally they are one-sided. The receiving entity does not give back anything. So it is outside the scope of consideration. However, if there exists a quid pro quo, wherein the government has given a clarification saying that if there is something in return which is being expected, wherein there's an obligation of the receipt on the part of the recipient of the donation to do something, then it's a supply. So I give a donation and I expect that the entity, generally I give a donation to a charitable trust or an NGO. Now I expect something in return for it. I say that I'll give you a donation of 1 lakh rupees. You have to give, supply some benefits to my company. So if there is some quid pro quo, then that donation will be treated as a consideration. The entity who is, suppose, say, I give a donation to an organization and I tell them you have to supply food for my employees. Then the entity receiving, the charitable organization who's receiving the donation is obligated to do something. Then the donation is not a donation. They will treat it as a supply and they have to pay GST on that also. Okay, so donation is something which I give it without any anything expecting something. Another example they have given in the clarification is they have given a circular. They have said that if the name of the donor is displayed as an expression of gratitude. Now take this example of a big organization. In case of a multinational company, give some donation of a vehicle or something. Now they've just given it off, okay, and they expect that the other NGO which receives it, that they have to market saying that we have received donation from this MNC and they should display everywhere. When I give some considering, when I give some conditions to it, okay, so then what I'm doing, I'm basically not doing a donation, I'm doing a marketing services. So if I'm doing anything of such kind, then it will not be treated as a donation. But if the other entity just says that as a matter of gratitude, okay, received from MNC, this organizations, just as a matter of gratitude, it has to mention somewhere, not as a marketing thing like that. And there's no condition that I give to them. then it is not treated as a consideration. It is treated as a pure donation. Okay. Another clarification. So donation, you clear? Donation, when I give something without anything, without any expecting something in return, then it is not a consideration. It is a pure donation itself. But if I tell that you have to do something, I use it as a tool for my marketing, then it is not a pure donation. It will be treated as a consideration. Then we have seen examples of artworks. So where I give some, I'm an artist. As an artist, I give my artworks exhibiting at galleries and exhibition, and nothing is received by the artist for display. There is no supply. So I give something for a display at the exhibition, and that after the exhibition, that artwork comes back to me. So it's not a supply, it's just exhibiting. It's an exhibition. This they have clarified. The government has given a clarification saying that exhibition at the art gallery is not a supply. You give it and get it back. But if somebody buys it, that is when the supply takes place. Somebody likes it at the exhibition and he's taken it. Then it's a supply transaction, not otherwise. Okay. So this is the example of consideration and what are the clarifications given. Now, there are two things, consideration, and it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Now, what is business itself? Business is defined as any trade, commerce, manufacture, profession or vocation. Okay, any trade, commerce, manufacture, trading means trading, buying and selling of goods. Commerce would mean any activity wherein there is a consideration involved, wherein any economical activity is treated as a commerce transaction. Manufacturing, we know any manufacturing activity. Profession, all of our professional, a chartered accountant or a singer or an engineer doing any services as a profession, that is covered under the definition of business. Vocation, which means anything which I'm doing as a matter of my vocation, which could be as an artist, a singer, a dancer. All of that is covered under the definition of vocation. Okay, all of these activities are covered under the definition of business. It could be incidental or ancillary to this. Doing some incidental activities like I'll have to provide transportation, I'll have to do some packaging. I'm not into the business of packaging, but it is an incidental or auxiliary activity wherein I have to do a packaging of the goods and then supply so that the products reach safely to my customers. So this activity of packaging is also covered under the definition of business. So main trading activity plus any other activity which I do, which is incidental or ancillary to my main activity, is also covered under the definition of business. Now, whether or not there is volume, frequency, continuity, and regularity. Suppose I do this. This is a really tricky thing wherein it could fall under the definition of business or it could not fall under the definition of business. My example when I gave that a trader has bought something for his personal use and he is sold. Okay, it is purely bought for personal business and sold. It is outside the purview of business. But the business itself says that whether there is a volume, frequency, continuity, or irregularity, or there is regularity, whether I'm doing regularly or no. So we'll have to judge this on each case-to-case basis, wherein whether it will be business or no. Suppose we've seen that if Shah Rukh Khan does any painting, okay, you know that even if he paints anything, their fans will buy it, right? Now, he might not be doing it on a regular basis, but he might be doing it on one-time basis. That will also be covered under the definition of business because there is no requirement that there should be frequency or continuity, but there is some brand which has been attached to it. That's the reason I'm saying that when I do some painting, nobody is going to buy. Even if somebody buys it, it is not a business for me because I'm not a painter. I don't have any brand value attached to it. But if an artist, if an actor does it, in our example, if the Shah Rukh Khan does some painting and he sells it, then his brand value is also attached to that painting. That's the reason I'm saying that it will be covered under the definition of business. Okay. Supply or acquisition of goods, including capital goods and services. So any activity done before starting of the business is also covered under the definition of business because business doesn't start when you actually start your trading activities. Anything done before also is covered under the definition of business. So any acquisition of goods also which I do, that is also business activity. Provision of facilities to members of a club. Okay, any provision of facility to members of a club. If we have seen there is some issue going on in case of service tax, wherein they've decided that the club activities are not there covered under the definition of service, but under GST, they specifically said that provision of facilities to members of a club is a business, so it is covered under the business definition. Admission of persons to any premises, entry fees you collect is also considered, or any event you're conducting and you're collecting entry fees, that is also covered under definition of business. Services supplied by a person as a holder of an office means any services as a holder of office. Example would be a director, okay, and he's providing the service and he's collecting any director services. He's holding the position of a director and he's collecting some director services or director sitting fees. That is also covered under business. So you cannot tell that this is not under definition of business. I'm just doing it as a professional capacity. No, a director collecting director service fees is also liable as a is covered under definition of business. Services by a race club, activities undertaken by the central government, state government. So any activities conducted by the central government and state government is also covered under the definition of business. All of this, the definition of business is huge gambit. So when we say business, all of this is covered in the definition of business. Now we have used the term in the course or furtherance of business, which means for doing it for the business or in the course or furtherance of business, which means for the business directly or indirectly, which I do, is also covered under the definition of business. Deposit for supply of electricity is a pure deposit, so it is not covered under consideration. Please explain when deposit considered as an example. I gave you an example that I made a deposit. Now the other person has utilized it for supply. Then I've defaulted in making the payment and he's utilized that deposit for setting it off with against for the supply what he's made. Then it will be treated as a consideration. So for example, if I give money to my relative when there is need but without any returns, but thinking that they will give me in future when I might need, is it consideration? No, it is not a consideration because it's a transaction in money. Difference between vocation and profession. Profession is when you have a professional degree. Vocation is anything other than profession, which means that anything which you do as a skill is all covered under vocation. No volume frequency wala, wherein there is no frequency wherein I do activity one time also. Okay, wherein the concept definition of business says that it could be for one time, wherein they specifically said that whether or not there is a volume, frequency, continuity, wherein I can do the transaction one time also is covered under the definition of business. It just depends on case to case basis, wherein who does it and for what value he does it. If it is for a small value and if he is not doing it on a regular basis, it will not cover. But generally, they have said that frequency, volume, and regularity is not a criteria for you to treat as a business. Okay, so we'll just take a break of 5 minutes here. We'll really stick on to the timing and we'll start again at 7:35. Sir, yes, sir. I don't know the technical reason. I think you can just write to Ms. Shiji. You can just write to the Board of Studies. They will help you because everybody is able to download the notes. No problem with it. In terms of question, race club, separate race club is defined because race club, there was a confusion whether it is liable to business. It covers under what? Is it covered under trade, commerce, manufacture, or what is it? That's why to give clarity, they said services by a race club is liable and it is covered under the definition of business. We can say that no, we are not doing it for the business. It's just for the sake of entertainment and things. To clear away those doubts, they've said race club activity is also covered under business. Actors do acting. Is this a business or not? Yes, actors doing acting is a business itself. It is an activity of a vocation wherein they are professionals in their own field. So it is covered under the first limb itself. When artist is giving his artwork for exhibition and he's paid for displaying in the exhibition, okay, he's just getting some charges for displaying it. Yes, it will be treated as a consideration on which he have to charge GST. No frequency, that's what I'm saying. On the frequency part, it could be for one time or it could be one-time activity or it could be multiple times. Even if it is a one-time activity also, it will be treated as a business. Okay. Definition of business we have seen. So my intention is to make you understand the concepts very well. So if you have understood the concepts very well, then yes, it is good thing. Concepts may, if you don't understand, we can understand it through examples. That's the reason wherever examples are possible, I will give you the examples. Now, in case of this definition of business also, let's go through some of the examples which are very, very much important. Ramesh has sold a car which he is using for his personal use. Okay, now he was using for his personal use and he sold his car. Is it a business? No, it's not a business. It's not a supply because it is not made in the course of furtherance of business. He's not into the business of buying and selling of cars. So, but you only said no, even if it is volume is not there. Yes, I said volume is not there, but I said that it will be determined in each and every case whether it is actually liable for business or no. Now, he's not in, if he's used that car for his business purposes and if he's selling it, then there's a different scenario because when he's using for his business and he's selling it, he's claimed the input tax credit with the intention that he will use for his business and then he sold it, then it will be liable for GST. But if he's used it for his personal purpose and he's just sold it, okay, then it will not be liable for GST because there the question of frequency will not come, because he's just buying it as a one-time activity and he's not doing it as a regular thing. Okay, on such transactions which are outside the business, not every transactions will be liable for GST. Mahima has sold her old gold ornaments to Tanish Jewels. Is it a supply? She has sold her old gold. Now there is a clarification also in this case wherein they've said that if you sell any old gold, then it is not a supply transaction because it is not in the course or furtherance of business. Okay. Now, Shah Rukh Khan, the example which I've given, paints some painting and sells them. However, the consideration is donated to a charity. Now, he gets consideration and then he gives to a charity. So, firstly, it will qualify as a supply. Since business includes vocation, then yes, it's a one-time activity. But I said that it is a one-time activity, but the brand value is attached. So, there is liable to GST. But he's donating it to a charity, but he has to pay the GST first. Then whatever money he gets on that, he can give it to a charity. Okay, but say a same thing that a charitable organization is doing is a charitable organization is conducting an activity wherein they call Shah Rukh Khan. They don't pay the Shah Rukh Khan anything, but the money comes to the charitable organization directly. Then it's a different scenario because any consideration received by a charitable organization, which is for the purpose of the charitable unit, and it is covered under 12A of the Income Tax Act, it's a charitable organization, then it is not liable to GST. But if some artist gets it, actor gets it, and then he gives to a charity, then there are two legs. He gets the consideration, then he gives to a charity. Okay, so you have to be careful with some transaction, how it is structured, how they question it. Whether they question that the consideration is received and then he gives to a charity, then there are two limbs. One, he gets the consideration and then he gives it. Okay, so that's a difference between getting and receiving and the money coming to the charitable organization directly. Recovery of food expenses from employees. Now, employees are working in my organization. Now, I give some canteen services. Okay, a canteen is run and I get some services and take some money from the employees. So it is a supply transaction. Why? Because giving something and getting some consideration could be that you're getting very minimal consideration, but still it is said that any recovery which you do from employees, you are liable to pay GST on it. But we'll see under Schedule 2, Schedule 3, when it is not a supply transaction, that any money you give as a salary in the course of employment is outside supply. But in this case, instead of you giving salary, you giving something to them, they are giving something to you. So it's a reverse case. So it is treated as a supply transaction. PDF is not visible. PPT. Let me share the PPT. Okay. Sir, can ITC of car in business be used for other tax like selling goods, set of available parts? A very good question. But ITC, when we come to that definition, you'll see that in case of a ITC on car, you don't get, even if it is used for a business. So you don't get ITC when it is used for your, even if it is used for your business. Very good application path. And if I buy a car and if I can claim a credit, can I use it for any business? Generally, ITC works that it's like a bucket. So any credit which you claim, you can use for any of your business. But for car, there is no credit which is available. Very good questions. If a person sells his land occasionally, then is it supply? On sale of land, we'll see under Schedule 3. On sale of land, there is no. It is treated as a no supply transaction. It is covered under Schedule 3, where it is treated as not a supply of good, not supply of services. In case of ESOP given to employees, it's supply? No. It is treated as a securities. ESOP is securities, right? Shares for consideration, not consideration. So ESOP is not a supply. Purchasing goods car is taxable now? Yes. Purchasing any car is taxable, but credit on only commercial cars or commercial vehicles is available now, but on this thing, on car per se, which is used for driving, and we'll see that on up to 12-seater capacity, even if it is used for transporting employees, it's not, credit is not available. What about government vehicle auction to general public? So when the government auctions vehicles to general public, the process, what it works is it's a regular activity, not a one-time activity, wherein auctioning services is also treated as a supply service. It's treated as a business, because in the course of business, the exact thing of in the course of business is means the government is, or a banking is into the business of banking services. Now they have given loans to a person for car loans. Now if that person has defaulted, they will do auction of it. They will not just do auctions one every time, things like that. They will accumulate lot of vehicles and then do it. So whether they are into the business of actually into the business of auctioning, no, they are into the business of banking. But auctioning is in the course or furtherance of its business, because they have to clear their debts That they have to convert their non-performing assets. They have to close their non-performing assets. So that's why they'll do auction. So it is not in the course of business. It is not their business, but it is in the course or furtherance of its business. So it is also treated as a business. So Mr. A gave loan to Mr. B of 50 lakhs and Mr. B returned 60 lakhs to Mr. A. 50 lakhs which Mr. A had given to Mr. B is come under goods or services. You have given loan of 50 lakhs and you have returned 60 lakhs, which means the 10 lakhs is interest on the, if whatever is the interest component, that will be treated as a service. In case of sale of old car, can I charge GST on it? Yeah, if you want to charge, you can charge. But if it is used for your personal purposes and you're selling it, then I don't think they should be liable for GST because it will not be treated as a business. Can ESOP be considered as a supply as a share? Even instead of giving salary, and you cannot give the salary, right? Too much. Something has to be given apart from salary. So that's the reason you give something to the employees in the matter of, as a matter of employment. In the matter of employment, you're giving. If he's not an employee, you cannot give him an ESOP, right? So ESOP is two things. One is it is a consideration in the course of employment, so it is not liable to GST. Second is it is a security. That's the reason also from both the perspective, it will not be liable for GST. On car, we cannot claim ITC because we claim depreciation, both cannot. No, Vishaka, I'll get back on your car definition at a later point of time. We will discuss ITC. Okay, so this is the understanding of business. Now let's get into the definition of Schedule 1. What are all covered under Schedule 1? Permanent transfer, or wherein we have said that activities, they should be consideration and should be in the course of business. Here, it is in the course of furtherance of business, but it is without consideration. When I do these activities, even if there is no consideration, it will be treated as a supply. Permanent transfer or disposal of assets. When I dispose of assets, I'm disposing it off, right? Which means I'm not getting anything in return. Still, it will be liable for GST. You have to arrive at the value of those goods and pay GST on it. Disposal or transfer of business asset, the transfer or disposal must be permanent. It shouldn't be temporary, wherein I give something and get something in return, get it returned after some point of time. No, it should be a permanent disposal of assets. ITC must have been availed on such business assets. If I've availed ITC, then when I sell it, then it makes sense. So it could be a case wherein I have not availed ITC. Like an example of car. I said that tax credit is not available, right? So when I buy a car, I don't claim input tax credit. So when I sell it without consideration, then it will not be liable to GST. But when I sell the car for a consideration, then GST will be leviable. But a car is one of the assets wherein ITC is not available. So let me tell you something under ITC. Input tax credit is generally available on everything except if it is a block credit. Block credit, what is it? We'll get into it. But just for the purpose of clarification on this, understand that input tax is not available on some category wherein some block they've given. So those categories called as a block credit. So when I buy some asset, buy some block credit, I don't claim credit on it. So if I've not claimed the credit and if I'm selling it without consideration, so there is no loss to the revenue, saying that, okay, if you have not claimed the credit, then on the sell of, on the disposal of that asset, don't pay the GST. It will not be covered under Schedule 1 because Schedule 1 says that permanent transfer or disposal of assets, but it is liable to condition that ITC must have been availed. If I've availed the ITC and if I'm selling it without consideration, then it is liable for GST. Then even if it is without consideration, I will give some consideration to it and pay GST. Okay, how will I give some consideration? To the valuation rules. The valuation rules will tell that what is the fair market value, which means what is the fair price of that asset as on the date. On that, you have to pay GST. Okay. Second example is second instance which is specified in Schedule 1. First instance is permanent transfer or disposal of assets. Second instance is supply between related persons or distinct persons. Now, any supply which I made between related or distinct persons, somebody was asking what happens in case of transfer. Is it for consideration or not consideration? So if it is for consideration, then it is covered there. If it is for without consideration, then it is covered here. Like any stock transfer which I do from my head office to my branch office, then even if it is without consideration, then still I have to pay GST on it. Okay. Third instance is a principal or agent. One principal supplying any goods to the agent. Okay, even if it is without consideration, then also it is treated as a supply itself. Mind you, this is saying principal to agent only supply of goods and not supply of services. So if a principal gives any services to the agent without consideration, that is outside the scope of supply. No GST is payable. Okay. Fourth instance is import of services. We have said that import of services with consideration, and it should be without business and things. Here again, they have said import of services without consideration, but when it is imported from related persons or establishments located outside India. Import of services, if I do without consideration from my related person, not within India. If I do related person within India with no consideration, that's fine. But if I do with a related person who's outside India, could be like my associate company. Now, definition of related persons we'll see. But related persons who is outside India, it could be an associate company, holding company, subsidiary company, branch unit, all of those are treated as a related persons. Importation from related persons or establishments located outside India without considerations are liable to GST. So 4 instances under Schedule 1, permanent transfer or disposal of business assets, supply between related persons or distinct persons, principal and agent transactions, but this is only for goods, and importation of services from a related person outside India. Now, what is related persons? We'll read it, but distinct person means a person who is different from me, but he is registered in a different unit. So both of them are indirectly controlled by third persons. That is all associated companies. If they are controlled by a common person, even then they are related persons. Together, they directly or indirectly control a third person. So one company and another company, both of them directly or indirectly holding one another company. Okay, both of them put together hold that company. Then these two companies are treated as related persons. So you would see that lot of matrices if you draw, then you'll see that lot of combinations are possible for a related persons. Okay, so any transaction between related persons, if you do, it will be covered under Schedule 1. Then there is definition of distinct persons, right? What is a distinct person? For that, you need to have a basic understanding of registration. Who is registration given to? Registration is given to each person under each business name. If I have one unit, one address, it's fine. If I will take one registration. If I have multiple units in different states, in one state, I have one branch in Karnataka, one branch in Maharashtra, one branch in Telangana. So in each of these 3 locations are in different states, whether the other units are registered or no, all the 3 are treated as a distinct person. I can take registration over there or I don't take registration. That doesn't matter. All the 3 are treated as distinct persons. Now I have an option to take multiple registration in my state itself. I have 5 branches in Karnataka, one in Bangalore, one in Mysore, one in Hubli, one in Shimoga, one in Dharwad. So 5 locations, 5 different cities are there. Now for all of these, I can take one registration, or I can tell that I need separate registration for it. If I want separate registration because of my basic requirement that each unit should be distinguished, then I can take separate registration. If I take separate registration within one state, then each of these 5 units are treated as distinct persons, otherwise not. Okay, so if I take separate registrations for each of these 5 units, they are treated as distinct persons. Distinct persons, the establishment of a person with separate registrations, whether within the same state, union territory, or in different state or union territory, are considered as distinct persons. So when I take separate registration, they are treated as distinct persons. Whether a person is having a registered establishment in a state or union territory, has another establishment in another state or union territory, whether registered or not, are treated as establishment of distinct persons. Okay, so distinct persons means when there is separate registrations. If there is no separate registration, if they have taken, but they are in different state, okay, they are treated as establishment of distinct persons. What is the relevance of this? Any stock transfers between distinct persons will be qualified as supply, but stock transfers within the same state will not be considered as a supply. Okay, so any stock transfers within the same state wherein there is one registration taken, then it will not be treated as a supply. That is what is the relevance of a distinct person. A person who is taking separate registrations within a state, then any supply which I do will be treated as a supply. So any transfer what I do, I have to charge GST on it. But if I've taken one registration, I'm doing stock transfers within the state, then there's no GST liable. But outside the state, anything I do will be treated as an establishment of a distinct person. So I have to charge GST on that. Clear on this? So that is the meaning of related person and distinct person. Supply of goods or services between employer and employee, Schedule 3 exception. That I'll come to Schedule 3. That time I'll tell you that what happens in case of Schedule 3 transaction. Principal and agent. Supply of goods by a principal to his agent. Supply of goods only. Supply of goods by a principal to his agent without consideration, where the agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal is considered as a supply. Okay, so where a agent undertakes to supply the goods on behalf of the principal is considered as a supply and not otherwise, where the agent undertakes. Okay, only supply of goods and not supply of services. The deciding factor is whether the invoice for the further supply. How do you decide? How will you practically decide this? They have given a clarification in terms of a circular where they have said that invoice for further supply is being issued by the agent in his name. Okay, when the agent issues the invoice in his own name, right, then it will fall under supply. And the invoice is issued by the agent to the customer in the name of the principal. So he's acting on behalf of the principal. He does not have his individual entity. But when he has his individual identity as such, then second instance, invoice is issued by the agent to the customer in the name of the principal. The name of the principal, all the risk and reward are to the principal itself. Then it will not fall under para 3. It is not a supply. Okay. Another instance is if the goods are procured by the agent on behalf of the principal or invoiced in the name of agent. So basically, if any invoicing is in my name or I sell in my name, then it will be treated as a supply by the agent, not otherwise. Okay. So explaining you this again, supply of goods by the principal to the agent without consideration, where the agent undertakes the supply goods on behalf of the principal is considered as a supply and vice versa. So in both the instances where the agent undertakes supply in terms of principal, or principal takes to supply on behalf of the agent. And this circular gives clarification saying that when it will be treated as a supply. Now, principal agent, another important thing is what happens in case of there are various kinds of agents, del credar agent and things like that. A del credar agent is a person who guarantees that the payment will shall be made to the supplier. Okay, a del credar agent says that, okay, you supply goods to me and I will supply it to the customer, but I will ensure that you will get you give me the commission for my bringing you the customer, but I will ensure that you will get the money from the supplier. The risk on collection is on me. Okay, the del credar agent will pay the principal if the buyer defaults on the due date. So he is taking the whole risk. So del credar agent is an agent who finds the customer. Generally, all agent will find the customer, but del credar agent says that I will find your customer. You give me extra commission, because a del credar agent takes extra commission to ensuring that the payment is also received by the supplier, so that if the buyer defaults, then the del credar agent will make the payment. Whether del credar agent will fall under para 3 of schedule 1, it is decided based on the discussion in this circular. Okay, whether it is in this circular what they have said, where the interest is charged by the del credar agent for short-term loan is to be included in the value of the supply of principal. That is when del credar agent is not an agent under para 3. Okay, supply of goods by the principal, whether the interest charged by the del credar agent for the short-term loan is to be included in the value of supply. No, whatever interest he charges, it is not to be included, because supply of goods by the principal to the recipient. Agency services is provided by the del credar agent to seller or buyer. Loan service is provided by del credar agent to the buyer, wherein what happens in this case, the del credar agent says that I will give you some money and you pay me some interest to the buyer, because if you don't pay, I will have to pay to the seller. So I will give you some loan to pay to him on time. So on that interest, whatever is charged, will it be included in the value of supply? No, it will not be included in the value of supply. Okay, that is first thing. Then when del credar agent is an agent under para 3 and makes payment on behalf of the buyer and charges interest to the buyer, will supply value has to be increased? Yes, in this case it has to be increased because supply of goods by the principal to the del credar agent supply of goods by the del credar agent to the buyer. When the agent supplies the goods to the buyer, okay, and he makes payment on behalf of the buyer and charges interest to the buyer. He is making payment to the seller. Then the agency services by the DCA to the seller or buyer. Loan services by the DCA to the buyer is a recipient. So basically understand that what the circular is trying to say is, what is the role of this del credar agent? If this del credar agent says that I will take the whole responsibility, okay, then, and he says that I will provide some interest, I will provide some loan to the buyer, and the buyer, you make payment to the customer, to the seller directly. If the buyer makes payment to the seller directly and del credar agent is not in the being, but he gives a loan, then that interest component need not be included in the value of supply. But if the del credar agent makes payment to the seller, then that interest has to be included. Okay, that is what is the relevance of this circular. The circular also says that whether del credar agent will fall under para 3 has to be decided on each case-to-case basis, which is decided on the basis of circular number 57. They've just said this circular number, wherein they say that whether he's acting as a principal or agent, like in this example what we have given. Okay, this is the circular wherein the invoice is being issued in the name of agent or no. This 57 circular is what we have read, wherein further supply is being issued by his agent in his name. If he's doing it in his name, then it's a supply. If it is not doing in his name, he is doing it in the name of principal itself, then it is not a supply. Okay. Any doubts in this aspect? Del credar agent means an agent is like a normal agent between an agent, del credar commission, normal commission. Del credar agent takes additional efforts to ensure that the supplier gets the money from the customer. So a normal commission agent says that, okay, I'll buy you, I will find out a customer for you. You pay me 5% commission. Okay, he'll find a customer, I'll give him 5% commission. Now to follow up with the customer for payment is the responsibility of the seller itself. But when a del credar agent comes into picture, a del credar agent says that I will take, instead of 5%, 10% commission, but why extra commission I have to pay you? Because I will ensure that you don't follow up with the customer. Your payment terms is what? 60 days. Okay, on 60th day, if the customer does not pay, I will pay. That is how the del credar will work. So both are same, fourth point and first point loan service part? No, fourth point and first point is not the same. Wherein how the del credar agent comes in and whether that interest has to be included or no is what has been decided here. Where I give this loan facility as a separate facility to the customer too, so that I don't have to pay the amount to the buyer. I will give the loan as a separate agreement to the customer. In that case, that interest need not be included in the supply value. But if I am saying that in this case, when del credar agent is an agent under para 3 and makes payment on behalf of the buyer and charges interest to the buyer, will supply value has to be increased? Yes, it says, because any interest the seller is charging to the buyer, okay, and I make payment on behalf of the buyer, then it has to be included. It means del credar agent falls under para 3. If he falls under para 3, then interest amount is included and not otherwise. Correct. How does a del credar agent fall under para 3? Del credar agent falls under para 3, where it's a supply of goods by a principal to agent without consideration, wherein principal supplies to the agent without a consideration when the agent undertakes to supply goods on behalf of the principal. Okay, wherein he's acting independently, he's acting in his own merits, then he will be treated as an independent person, and even if it is without consideration, still they will be liable for GST on the basis of transaction value. So when we say that no consideration, then how will we arrive at the consideration? Through having something called as a transaction value, which means that what is the open book value? There's something called in the valuation, they've said that open value, which means that what if I sell this goods to a normal customer, what will be the price? That will be the price I will have to consider as a consideration. Great. There's a good news that one Mr. Aditya Grover has said that he's cleared both CA intergroups, and he was a student from batch 3 and he is very happy today. Hopefully current students also are taking benefits of these classes. Congratulations, Aditya, and all the very best. Thank you very much for listening to the classes, and really happy that yes, these classes are helpful to you. Great. Importation of services. So importation of services, there are various things, various places. Import of services, firstly, without consideration by a person. In the fourth point said that import of services without consideration from a related person or from his establishment located outside India in the course of other business. However, in section 7.1b, we have said that import of services, whether or not in the course of business, is covered under supply, but there has to be consideration. So a lot of confusion. So this table will give you clarity. First is when there is importation of services and there is consideration present. Okay, and it is in the course of furtherance of business. All the three legs, it is taxable, no doubt. Then we saw under 7.1b, wherein consideration is there, but it is not in the course of furtherance of business. Example, Netflix. In that case of Netflix also, it is taxable, right? It is taxable. Who will pay the taxes will determine later on, but if it is taxable, firstly. Then importation of services, consideration is not present, and it is in the course of furtherance of business. Is it taxable or no? It is taxable in terms of this point 4 of Schedule 1 if it is from a related or is establishment located outside India. Okay, only if it is a related or establishment located outside India, then it is liable, otherwise no. Suppose I do import of, generally it will be outside India because I'm doing import of service, right? And it is a establishment. Suppose I do importation of services, where consideration is not there, and it is in the course of furtherance of business, and it is not from a related person. Suppose a third person says that, okay, I will provide you some services. To use my services, I will not charge you anything as a sample basis. Okay, it is in the course of furtherance of business, but there is no consideration. Then no, it is not taxable because it is not from a related or a person, related or any establishment located outside India. It is not from a related person. Clear? Got this example? Then fourth limb will be when I import some services, consideration is not present and it is not in the course of furtherance of business. Netflix, consideration is not present and I'm using it not in the course of furtherance of business. I'm not paid anything. They've given me some free period. Okay, then it is not taxable. Clear on this? Importation, 4 limbs. When consideration is present and it is in the course of business or not in the course of business, both it is taxable. When consideration is not present, not in the course of furtherance of business, not taxable. Not present and in the course of furtherance of business, it is taxable only if it is from a related person or any establishment located outside India. So if branch is providing any services to me, even if there's no consideration, it will be taxable under reverse charge. Now in this leg, it is taxable when it is taxable under 2 cases. Okay. First is when I am registered. Then I have to pay under RCM. And second case is when I am not registered, unregistered. If I'm unregistered, then it should be paid by the supplier itself, only in case of a OIDAR services, not otherwise. Clear on this? Okay. Supplies without consideration, schedule 1, where even if no consideration, it will be considered as a supply. What happens in case of a sales promotion scheme where I'm running a sales promotion scheme? Are all not liable to GST? Sales promotion schemes, not everything. Wherein I've said that I do some sales promotion schemes and things. What happens in such cases? Free samples. If I give some free samples, okay, do not qualify as supply. However, input tax needs to be levied because I said that when I'm doing any consideration, I'm doing any supply, there should be a consideration. So in case of free sample, I'm not getting any consideration. So it is not a supply. But when you go to input tax credit chapter, you'll see that anything which you're supplying, okay, for which there is no consideration, you will have to reverse the input tax credit because government cannot lose revenue. So any free supplies you're doing, then you have to reverse in such cases. And what happens in case of buy one, get one schemes? It is treated as a composite supply, wherein when I'm doing, like generally in case of pharma companies, we'll see that buy one strip, you'll get one more strip free, where the wholesaler will have schemes. In such case, you don't have to reverse anything. It will be treated as, it is generally, although the costing also works, that the cost of the free for buy one, get one free, for the one which you're giving free, that will be included in the price of the first one itself. So there is no input tax reversal required. So there are two things. One is free samples. In case of free samples, you have to reverse the input tax credit. But in case of buy one, get one scheme, you don't have to reverse the input tax credit. Section 1A, classification, schedule 2 says that it is a classification. 7.1A, we said that schedule 2, it says that GST is one tax for all, but the rate of goods and services is different. Hence, it becomes important to categorize the rate of job work for product. If service, then the rate is 18%, but the rate on steel as goods is 12%. So what I'm saying is, if you're doing job work on some goods like steel, job work on the goods, right? I'm a steel manufacturer. If I sell the steel, if I convert the steel into a utensil, the rate is 12%. But if I'm giving this to a job worker, then it's a service, right? He cannot tell that he's buying because job worker is not buying from me. He's doing job work service. The rate of job work is 18%. So that's the reason the classification becomes important, because for the rate of goods is 12%, but the rate on services is 18%. Restaurant used to charge VAT and service tax under earlier regime. So that's why there were two taxes which were there to withhold, to not to have any confusion. That's why they have this schedule 2 now. Now what is schedule 2? To briefly understand the schedule 2, we'll cover this. They said, I'm just explain you the important terms. Yeah. Schedule 1 says that any transfer of title in goods is supply of goods, which means that any transfer of ownership, transfer of possession and control of goods is transfer of goods. Basically, all sale is supply of goods. Any transfer of right in goods, wherein I'm giving something to use, any usage of goods if I'm giving, then it's a supply of services. Means supply of equipments and machinery to contractor, renting of machinery, renting services, wherein when I'm selling the goods, it is treated as goods, and I'm supplying the services for rental services, transfer of right in goods without the transfer of title. That's wherein the title is not transferred, then it is a supply of service. Then land and building, all this is basically self-explanatory. They've given a classification like any letting out of a building, including a commercial scheme, that is the accommodation services by hotels and everything, they are covered under supply of services. Treatment or process is again supply of services. Transfer of business assets is supply of goods. The treatment shall remain same whether transaction is done for a consideration or whether not for consideration. Okay, so whether it's for consideration or not consideration, schedule 2 it basically says, doesn't say anything about consideration. What are the activities which is covered under goods and services? Renting of immovable property is a supply of services. However, not all renting is liable for GST. Renting of residential units are exempted under the exemption notification. Then temporary transfer or permitting the use or enjoyment of any intellectual property, which is all any intellectual property means copyright, patent, trademark, all of this is transfer of goods. Permanent transfer is copyright, patents, all of this is license, is a service. Permanent transfer is goods. Okay, then you have late payment charges, notice pay recovery. All of this will be liable for services itself. Okay, so basically just giving you the schedule 2, but this schedule is not much to be explained. All of this is given in your thing. I don't expect much importance on this schedule 2. Okay, taxability of tenancy or pagdi rights that given through terms of a clarification saying that what happens in case of a pagdi right. Landowner has various rights. Okay, a person who's having a landowner, he has various rights. He does not have only right over the property. He has a right of possession. He has a right to control it. He has a right to exclude some part. He has a right to derive some income, and he has a right to sell it off. So various rights are there. Amongst these rights, activity of transfer of tenancy right against consideration is supply of service in GST. Wherein I'm transferring one of the tenancy right is a supply of service under GST. However, grant of tenancy right in residential dwelling is exempted, right? Wherein I give a rent, anybody a rent of a residential thing is exempted. That's what we have seen. But surrendering the tenancy right, and tenancy right itself I'm surrendering. Wherein I'm saying that I'm the owner of the property, but I will surrender this tenancy right itself for a consideration, then it is liable for GST. So I'm saying there are two things. One is getting rent and one is the right itself. So if I'm giving off that right itself, then it is not a tenancy. It's not collecting of rent. I'm giving away my right to collect the rent. Okay, that is what I'm getting a pagdi. Pagdi means one-time premium. It's a premium or a goodwill you can call for giving away my right to collect the rent. I know that I cannot maintain this property, so I'm giving this property to another person. He's saying, I will collect the rent from this and that. You don't have to worry about it. I will give you some amount, pagdi. I'll give you a one-time amount. So this one-time amount, what I'm getting is liable to GST because it is different from collecting of rent. That is what there's a clarification saying that one-time collection or the premium what you get for giving away your tenancy right is liable for GST. Okay. Now we'll go to Schedule 3. What is non-supplies? Non-supplies could be of three varieties. It could be Schedule 3. It could be through a notification or it could be through a clarification. Now, Schedule 3 it says that, what all does it say? Schedule 3 says that following activities are okay. Schedule 3, there could be three things. Now, there could be various things. Firstly, non-supplies could be of various things. Schedule 3, notification or clarification. Schedule 3 says all these activities are outside GST. Any services provided by the employee to the employer, which means that what is employee providing? He's providing some services. He's providing his labor services to the employer, for which employer is paying him salary, right? So this is under Schedule 3. It is no supply of goods, nor supply of services. That's why on salary, no GST. Any court or tribunal providing any services, right? Court or tribunal is set up by the government itself or the authority itself. It is outside the scope of GST. No, it is treated as no supply of goods, no supply of services. Function performed by MP or MLA, right? Recognized as a government services outside the scope of GST. Funeral, burial, or crematorium services outside GST. Sale of land. I was saying, no, sale of land when you do is outside GST. Subject to Section 2, Schedule 2, which is 5B. And Schedule 2, 5B is contract services, wherein construction services, building services is liable to GST, but sale of land is not liable for GST. Because when I sell building, land also is like an apartment. When I sell, land is also included. So how do you bifurcate? You cannot bifurcate. So there is a separate mechanism for that. They've said sale of land per se is outside GST, but sale of building is not excluded. Sale of building is liable as a GST on services. Then actionable claim is also excluded other than lottery, betting and gambling. So a lot of other actionable claims are there. Like you said, a right to correct rent, right to correct anything from your debtors. That is actionable claim, but there is no GST on that because it's outside the scope of GST other than lottery, betting and gambling. So only on lottery, betting and gambling, GST will be applicable, not otherwise. Lottery, it will be any kind of betting and any gambling, even though it's an illegal thing. But they've said anything to do like race horse, if they do any betting there it is a legal thing. So legal betting and lottery, betting and gambling are only liable for GST. Apart from that, all actionable claims are excluded. Then non-supplies, we saw schedule 3. Then notification, they've said any panchayat and municipality services, any panchayat services and municipality, local municipality doing services are excluded from this of GST because they have said that 7.3, there could be some 7.1.2, 7.2, they said that there could be some notification which they will issue. So in that, they have issued 2 notifications. They have said that panchayat and municipality services is outside the scope of GST. Then any alcoholic liquor license. So anybody supplying any alcoholic liquor license, wherein who gives this alcoholic liquor license? The state governments. So we have seen that alcoholic liquor is liable for state excise duty. Now, if anybody has to open a liquor shop, they have to get any license from the government, state government. The state governments providing any alcoholic liquor license services, giving any license for which they receive some consideration, that is outside the scope of GST, that is given through a notification. Then there is a clarification which says that interstate movement of conveyance between distinct persons, which means that, say, an interstate movement of conveyance means any kind of vehicles. So if a bus is moving from one place to another place, the ticket charges on the GST will be there, but that movement of the bus per se is outside the scope of GST because it is not a supply itself. They've said that this is not a supply, but generally any movement we have seen movable goods is liable for GST, but they have given a clarification saying that this is the mode of conveyance, so it is not liable for GST. Also, any movement of conveyance between distinct persons. So if any distinct persons are there and they're using any vehicle, okay, they're doing any vehicle movement, okay, and say like a lorry is transporting from a head office to branch office the goods. On the goods, GST will be there, but that lorry per se is not a supply. Okay. Then interstate movements of rigs, tools, spares, goods on wheels for repair services. So any rigs, tools, spares or goods on wheels for repair services is not liable to GST. So these is all the clarifications for non-supplies. Then we'll come to the concept of composite and mixed supply. Before coming to composite and mixed supply, do you have any questions? Courier sent to related persons outside India. That is exports. So exports are not liable to GST. What's crematorium? Crematorium is a person. Crematorium, when somebody dies, you get a cremation, right? Any cremation services is called as crematorium. House sale of building is services. In sale of building, you don't have, because the other person does a lot of things on your behalf, right? Because at least you have to do the construction activity. Now the builder does a lot of services in terms of hiring labor, putting in efforts and things like that. And he gives you the structure and gives you the building, right? He does the construction activity. In case of a builder, he does the construction services. So construction services is a service. Lottery is charged to tax under other sources. Yeah, under income tax, it is other sources, but under GST, on lottery also, you have GST liability. Rekha Kumari, what is your question on caretaker? Okay, you can post your questions till that I move to the next thing. Too much for today. Yeah, we're just getting to the last part, Pooja, which will be really simple. That is on the concept of composite and mixed supply. Very simple and easy to understand, but important. I can say that you might get some question from composite and mixed supply. What is a composite supply? Composite supply means a supply which is made by a taxable person to a recipient. Okay, and any supply which is made by a taxable person to a recipient, and it comprises of two or more taxable supplies. It comprises of two or more taxable supplies of goods or services, or any combination of services they are, which are naturally bundled and supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business, one of which is a principal supply, which means I'm having supplying two things, like my example of air conditioner, AMC, or air conditioner with fitting. Wherein there are two supplies. One is supply of air conditioner and supply of the fitting charges. Now I'm not collecting anything for fitting charges, and I'm saying that I can only do this fitting because this air conditioners are special kind of air conditioners. So in such case, what happens? It will be treated as a composite supply because it fits under these definitions. Composite supply means a supply made by a taxable person to a recipient. I'm making a taxable supply. It comprises of two or more taxable supplies. This is also one supply. Selling of air conditioner is one supply, and installation is one supply. Two or more taxable supplies of goods or services are both. It could be combination of anything. They are naturally bundled. They cannot be distinguished. They are naturally bundled. AMC, wherein I'm giving a AMC contract, I will do labor service also, and I'll do supply of the defective parts also. Are examples of composite supply. They are naturally bundled. They are not artificially bundled. I'm not artificially binding it. They are naturally bundled and supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business. In the ordinary course of business, when I buy some air conditioner, I will assume that yes, I will do the installation. So this is the ordinary course of business, one of which should be a principal supply. When I'm buying air conditioner, what is the principal supply? Installation. Am I doing that installation as activity? No, I'm buying the air conditioner. That is the principal activity. So one principal supply is there, which is the buying of the air conditioner. That is the supply. So this is the composite supply. What will be the rate of tax on the overall thing? What is the rate of the principal goods on one of the principal supply? That will be the rate on the things. Suppose air conditioner rate is 12% and labor charges is 18%. If air conditioner is 12%, this is the composite supply. Even on the labor, the rate of tax will be 12%. So that is a composite supply. Examples. How will we determine the perception of the consumer is important. What does the consumer say? Consumer says that you give me this air conditioner, like when I buy a mobile and the charger. This is also example of a composite supply, saying that when I buy a mobile, I assume that it will come with a charger. So it's naturally bundled. It is not artificially bundled, right? So mobile, when I buy, I'll cut it with the charger. If the charger rate is 12% and mobile rate is 5%, the rate of GST on the whole mobile unit itself will be 5%. How service provider in that business provides similar bundle of services. Example, air travel. How does the service provider provides? That will be the deciding factor. Okay. Then the nature of various services in a bundle of services, like stay at hotel. When I stay at hotel, I get complimentary food. Okay, it is naturally bundled. Even if I don't get food, I will still stay there, but it's a complimentary services. It's a naturally bundled along with the stay of hotel. And it is how it is normally advertised. It's normally advertised as a package, saying that stay at hotel and breakfast is complimentary. So it's covered as a package. That will determine that it is naturally bundled. Different elements are not separately available. Like example, water purifier services. And like by a water purifier services, all the filters also will be part of it. Okay, but you can get the filters replaced at a later point of time. So when I buy a water purifier, the water filters are naturally bundled with it. So that's an example of naturally bundling it. But sometimes they are artificially bundled also, some products. So how do we determine? These are the factors. Different elements are an integral part to the overall supply. Like when I buy a laptop, operating systems and softwares are operating system at least will be there, but the Microsoft packages are separate. So when I buy a laptop, operating system are integral to it. Without operating system, I will not buy. So these are all bundled services, which means these are all examples of a naturally bundled services, which means they are all examples of a composite supply. Now take a composite opposite of it, which is a mixed supply. Mixed supply means two or more individual supplies of goods or services or any combination thereof, which is made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price, where such supply does not constitute a composite supply. So you can basically tell what is not a composite supply is a mixed supply. Where the transactions consist of supplies not naturally bundled, which means they are artificially bundled in the ordinary course of business, and it is taxed at the highest rate in the various supplies. Which means what happens in case of a mixed supply, wherein I have various products Example, I buy a mobile phone. Now, along with the mobile phone, they're saying that, okay, we are having a gift hamper. You buy a mobile phone, you buy a pen also, and you buy a big high class pencil also. So mobile phone, pencil, and a pen is bundled together as a package. So this is not naturally bundled, because naturally in the perception of the person buying it, you only buy a mobile separately, you'll buy a pen separately and a pencil separately. Now they have artificially bundled all of these three and given off. When they artificially bundle all of these three and give this, okay, it is called as a mixed supply. When it is naturally bundled, mobile with charger is a composite supply, mobile with pen and pencil is a mixed supply. Now it is a mixed supply. Okay. Now there is no one principal supply. All the three are equally important. Then what will be the rate of tax on this mixed supply? In composite supply, we saw that what is the composite principal product on that rate, that will be the rate for the whole product. But if it's a mixed supply, what is the rate of GST on all of these three individually? Mobile 12%, pen 5%, pencil 5%, and say pen 18%. Then the rate of 18% will apply on this whole package. Because it is artificially bundled and it's a mixed supply, the rate, highest rate on any of these three, it cannot be that value terms or something like that. Whatever is the highest rate, that will apply on this whole supply. So that is what we are trying to say. What is the rate on mixed supply? What do you mean by perception? In the example, what I said, perception, how does the individual think about it? So what does the perception means? What is your expectation when you buy it? So when I buy a mobile phone, I expect that it will come with the charger. That's the perception. How to determine tax rate in case of composite supply? The tax rate in case of composite supply is determined on the basis of the highest component and the principal component. What is the principal component? When you are buying an air conditioner with the fitting charges, you are buying an air conditioner. That is the principal product, and the installation is ancillary. So that will be the rate. What will be the rate on the air conditioner will apply for the other installation also. Like I'm buying any goods and I'm telling that the other person do the packing also. He's doing the packaging also. So buying of goods, buying steel utensil. I'm buying a steel utensil. He will charge the rate what is applicable on the steel utensil on the whole service of steel utensil plus packing plus delivery charges. On the whole thing, he will charge the principal rate itself. That is, what is the rate on the steel utensils? He will charge on the packaging and transportation charges also. Yes, this is a small topic, and yeah, thank you, Pooja, for your compliments. Thank you very much. We'll get into the MCQs. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can post them. Supply includes what? Importation of services for a consideration in the course of business, importation of services for consideration not in the course of business. Is it both? Yes. Importation of services for consideration, whether in the course of business or not in the course of business, it includes both. 7(1)(b) includes this. Correct? So all the three. Any transaction involving goods of supply or services without consideration is not a supply unless it is deemed to be a supply under Schedule 1. So generally, there should be a consideration except Schedule 1, wherein even without consideration, it will be treated as a supply. Which schedule specify the activities or transactions which should be treated neither as a supply of goods or services? Schedule 3. Any trade, commerce, manufacture, similar activity to qualify business, frequency, volume, continuity, regularity is not a prerequisite. Yes, that is a true statement. What are the transactions treated as supply even if made without consideration? Permanent transfer, value of gifts exceeding more than 50,000 rupees. So this is one of the things which I said we'll cover up. So any gifts given by the employer to an employee up to 50,000 rupees is treated as fine. But if it does anything above 50,000 rupees, then he has to pay GST on it. So employer providing gifts to the employees up to 50, and supply of services between principal of agent with consideration. So if it is with consideration, then it is treated as a supply. The question is which is not treated as a supply. Okay, so principal and agent of goods is not treated, but supply of services is not treated. Okay, so when I said that schedule 1, we have said that principal and agent only supply of goods is covered, supply of services is not covered. So supply of services is excluded. This is a very tricky thing. Supply of goods, supply of services without consideration, and they have said supply of services with consideration. So if it is supply of services with consideration, it is treated as supply. If it is supply of goods between principal and agent, okay, it is not treated. It is treated as a supply because we have said it is covered under Schedule 1. What is excluded under Schedule 1 is supply of services, right? So supply of services is not treated. Identify which is not qualified as supply of goods. Any transfer of right in goods without transfer of title thereof is not. So Schedule 2 classification, when you see, you will get to know that without transfer of title thereof is the supply of service. Which of the following are registered in Schedule 3? All of this: port services, funeral, burial services, and actionable claims. Which of the following statement is not true? Composite supply, 2 or more supplies are naturally bundled. That is true statement. In mixed supply, tax liability shall be at the rate applicable to the supply that attracts highest rate of tax. In mixed supply, 2 or more supplies are naturally bundled. No. In mixed supply, 2 or more supplies are artificially bundled. And in composite supply, tax liability shall be the rate of principal supply. So that is all correct. All of this is correct statement. Only this is a false statement. Too much content to revise today? Yes, it is too much content. Okay, in supermarket, we go to supermarket and buy various products. The highest rate of tax of such goods is charged for all the goods we buy. No, you're buying individually. You're not buying as a package. If the supermarket is bundling something, now they'll have some gift hampers wherein they'll sell toothpaste, toothbrush, and a shaving thing. In that case, it's a mixed supply. Then what is the rate on the highest product you'll supply? But when you go to a supermarket, you're not telling I'll buy everything. Whatever I choose, I will buy. So they will sell each product at the applicable rate, and that is not an example of a mixed supply. Those are individual supplies. Okay, so it is not an example of a mixed supply. In case of car sale, few services are free. How will it be treated? In case of car sale, they'll give some few services like cleaning services and things. So it will be treated as a composite supply wherein the main part is the car, right? So whatever is the rate on the car will be applied on all other activities. Very good, very good. I've seen a lot of people saying that yes, this concept you're very early able to understand and have made it very simple. Thank you. This was a very tricky subject, tricky topic, and if you understood this, it's really good. So we need to remember each and every provision. At least section 7, I would suggest that you remember each and every provision because it will give you a clarity. But if you're getting confused, then it's okay. But other sections are not important. Section 7 is really important. MCQ, I will upload. Yes, I will upload. How about buy one and get one free? In case of buy one, get one free, what happens is I am selling 100 rupees product. Okay, I would have generally sold 100 rupees, but I will tell, okay, I will sell it at 150 and I'll give you 1 plus 1 free. So the prices of both the products I will treat it as bundled. And good that you have understood the concept, students. Now, to make this lighter, you have a holiday tomorrow. Just go through the slides. Okay, go through the various MCQs with the answers. You'll be able to understand something because the heavy topics you tend to lose out. Just go through this, go through your material along with this. I'm sure it will be there on your memory for a long time. Supply is a very, very important chapter now and for your practice in the future also. Please go through this. there any trick on how you remember everything with so much clarity? It is all terms of repetition. So I've been repeating this again and again. And we have read through the GST day in and day out. Even today, if some client asks me questions, sometimes I have to go back and refer to the section because each and every word is so very important. So how you watch a movie and you can remember the story even if we ask you after 3 years. Similarly, read the questions, even if it is dry, you have to read it with full concentration. If you read it with full concentration, you will definitely get a grasp on this. When we are buying something, there is guarantee and warranty. So they come under composite supply itself. So when I buy example would be a television. When I buy a television, they give me warranty. So it is always treated that the price on the warranty is not charged separately. It is embedded in the product itself. The TV cost is including the warranty thing itself. Okay, the warranty is a part of their costing on the television itself, because or sometimes they change the extended warranty, right? So it means it is a separate price what you pay. But if it is without a separate price, the price of the product itself, including the warranty cost, so it will be treated as a composite supply. Very good question, Nidhi. Yes, as we had explained in the first session, make your own notes wherever possible. That you'll remember. Insurance service. Not come across any practical case. It would be a theoretical case wherein insurance service is also provided and loan also is given. Insurance service is liable to GST, but loan service is not liable to GST. So generally, they will not give as a bundle service. They'll give as a separate services, because if they do bundling it off, then on loan services, you'll have to pay GST. So interest is actually exempt activity. So insurance is liable to GST. Is guarantee and composite supply? Yes, guarantee is a composite supply with the main product. TV with installation services, then salary paid to the worker who does installation, and TV amount will be taxed at the rate of TA. Yes, if TV and installation you are separating, then the rate of TV will be, the GST on the TV will be separate and installation services will be separate. Then it is separated, then it will be separate. What type of questions may asked by the examiner? Various types. It could be in terms of composite supply, various supply. There will definitely be some weightage given. So it could be various things. Be confident with each and every nook and corner of this topic. Yeah, will there be a question on determination of supply? Yes, there could be a question on determination of supply. They generally don't integrate this with others, because in a bigger questions they cannot ask something. But yeah, it will be there. We'll come up with some examples wherein they will integrate this, and you have to say that no, this is not a supply. Yeah, it can get integrated also. Okay, there were some video lags. I'll ensure that I don't move my face here and there when I'm discussing this. Recharge on mobile data, GST charge. How Vodafone collected. Recharge on mobile data, GST charge. On mobile data and the rate of GST on data and the value of things, it is a one supply itself. So there's no separate thing on it. It is one charge itself. So when you do a recharge, if you say 100 rupees, that 100 rupees includes GST on it. So they'll do a reverse calculation. They'll tell, okay, 90 is the value of service and 10 is the GST. So they will pay 10 rupees as GST to the government. Does lottery and gambling income liable to both income tax or GST? Yes, lottery income, gambling will be liable for both. So on the most of the things are like that, no? So when you buy any product and if you're selling any goods, so capital goods also will be there, GST also will be there. So it is possible because there are two separate aspects. One is income. If you're making any profit on that, you'll pay income tax. On any sale transaction, if there is GST, you'll pay GST also. It is very much possible that you will have two taxes, Sandeep. Wherein income tax is on your income and GST is on your transaction. So no problem. They could be two transactions. Is gambling and lottery liable to pay tax under both indirect tax and direct tax? Yes, both direct tax and indirect, because you'll pay income tax on the profit what you do, and on gambling activity on the transaction value you'll pay GST. Okay, thank you very much. All the very best on this chapter, and have a happy weekend and a great day ahead, great night ahead. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.